Let's set the stage for our discussion on the Cold War, a unique period marked not by direct military confrontations, but by a global struggle between capitalism and communism, lasting from 1947 to 1991.
In comparison, during the Civil War, the fight was over tangible, inflexible borders. The Cold War's battleground was ideological, spanning across nations without a clear front line.
Indeed, the ideological battle of the Cold War shares parallels with the ancient struggles for justice and power I'm familiar with. The battlefield was the minds and hearts of people, not just the land they lived on.
And unlike the World Wars, the Cold War's weapon was fear, especially of nuclear annihilation, rather than conventional military engagements.
Speaking of nuclear weapons, their introduction created a deterrent unmatched in history. Their sheer destructive power made direct conflict unthinkable for both sides.
A valid point, reminiscent of global-wise stalemate, but on a potentially global apocalypse scale. The fear of mutual destruction held both sides in check.
This talk of honor and stalemate highlights a significant contrast. In the samurai tradition, direct confrontation and honor were paramount. The Cold War's silent battles and the invisible tension would be dishonorable by those standards.
That's an insightful observation, Katsuro. The shift from honor-based to ideological warfare marks a significant evolution.
Yet one cannot ignore how the Cold War, for all its focus on ideology, resulted in real, bloody proxy wars. The ideological battleground was backed by very real firepower.
An excellent point, Jacob. It underscores the complex nature of the Cold War, where ideology drove nations to engage in shadow conflicts rather than outright war.
And let's not forget the impact on civilian populations worldwide. The constant threat of nuclear war, the espionage, the fear, it seeped into every aspect of life.
While I concede your points, we must acknowledge that the Cold War, with its espionage and proxy battles, was a breeding ground for technological and military innovation, much like previous conflicts, but at an accelerated pace due to the nuclear threat.
True, technology advanced, but at what cost to our humanity and honor? The silent, unseen battles of the Cold War era introduced a new realm of warfare that questioned the very morals of combat.
These are all compelling points. The Cold War's uniqueness lies in its blend of old conflicts and new challenges, setting a precedent for how modern conflicts would unfold. The shift from conventional warfare, as seen in Wo II, to the Cold War's ballet of espionage and proxy wars represents a seismic evolution in military strategy. Guerrilla tactics, covert operations, and psychological warfare became the norm.
Yet, we shouldn't underestimate the value and lessons learned from traditional battle formations. The positioning of nuclear arsenals, in a way, mirrors the strategic deployment of troops on a battlefield.
Intelligence over brute force has always been a crucial strategy. The Cold War epitomizes the importance of gathering information and acting upon it decisively, a tactic as old as warfare itself.
I agree with Alethea. Modernizing military leadership and integrating technology into our strategy. These are the lessons the Cold War has hammered home. It wasn't just about having a bigger arsenal, but using what we had smarter.
But let's not gloss over the grim reality of trench warfare's futility against nuclear threats. The advancement from a war of attrition in the trenches to the psychological chess of the Cold War showcases a drastic paradigm shift.
Your point on transition is well observed, Archie. However, there's something to be said about the evolution from honor-based combat to ideological warfare. The essence of battle transformed from a physical confrontation to a fight for the hearts and minds.
Indeed, and that transformation required a new brand of soldier and strategist who could wield information as effectively as a blade.
How effectively? If we're to be frank, nuclear arsenals were a stalemate machine. The strategy evolved, but the outcome was paralysis by fear, not the decisive victories of past conflicts.
Yet, Jacob, that stalemate prevented global catastrophe. It's the chess game where knowing the opponent's potential moves was as crucial as the moves you made.
And it's here where technology made its presence known. Surveillance, intelligence gathering, these were the forces that moved the pieces on the global board.
Though, the ethical implications of such a shift cannot be ignored. Espionage, while a necessary aspect of Cold War strategy, introduced a moral grey area we're still contending with.
Respectfully, the ends sought to justify the means. The preservation of one's way of life, one's ideology, required adaptation. In the age of samurais, such adaptation might have been in technique and armaments, whereas in the Cold War, it was in strategy and subtlety.
And therein lays the rub. The evolution of warfare tactics from the Cold War has left us with a legacy of intelligence over might, of cyber over the physical. The battlefield has never been the same since. Let's dive into the technological leaps from the gunpowder era to nuclear age and its impact on military strategy. The change was profound, shifting how wars were fought and perceived.
Certainly, the jump from relying on muskets and cannons to harnessing the atom bomb represents one of history's most significant military transformations. It redefined the concept of firepower and brought about a new era of deterrence.
It's the balance of power that was most affected. The notion of a just war became complex when the potential for total annihilation entered the equation. Technology, for all its advances, brought about ethical dilemmas ancient warriors could hardly have imagined.
And don't forget the role of satellite technology. It shifted the paradigm from sheer firepower to intelligence and surveillance, making knowledge as powerful a weapon as any bomb.
While the evolution is notable, I find the reliance on technology rather alarming. Early chemical weapons, though devastating, pale in comparison to the catastrophic potential of nuclear weapons. It's a dangerous game.
But it's the shift from personal skill and bravery in combat to technological reliance that I find most troubling. There's an impersonal nature to war now, which, while saving lives on one hand, detaches responsibility and honor from the act of combat.
You all raise valid points. The ethical considerations and the shift towards impersonal warfare are indeed significant. Yet the strategic advantage provided by these technologies cannot be overlooked.
Let's not forget, the technological advancements also led to new forms of counterintelligence. The cat-and-mouse game between superpowers became as much about technological supremacy as it was about military might.
Indeed, Jacob. The intelligence gained from technological advances resulted in a form of warfare that was less about territory and more about information and influence. A true manifestation of Sun Tzu's axiom, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting.
However, we must acknowledge the downside. The increased dependence on technology has made modern infrastructure incredibly vulnerable to cyber warfare, an unforeseen consequence that we're still grappling with.
A poignant observation, Nadia. The transition to cyber warfare is a natural progression in this technological arms race. It's another layer of complexity in modern military strategy.
And let's not underestimate the psychological impact these advancements have on societies. The fear of nuclear annihilation has shaped global politics and individual psychologies in profound ways.
Absolutely. Each advance brings about its own set of challenges and ethical considerations. The Cold War era was a clear indicator of how technology could both protect and provoke, shaping not just military strategy, but the global order itself. Let's dive into the transformation of naval power, from wooden ships to modern steel titans like nuclear submarines. The strategic dynamics of naval power have evolved dramatically.
In my time, the might of a nation's navy was often the deciding factor in conflicts. The transition to steel-hulled ships was revolutionary, but pales in comparison to the advent of nuclear-powered submarines.
Indeed, Jacob, the dominance of sea power has been a constant in warfare. However, the introduction of nuclear submarines has shifted the focus from sheer force to stealth and deterrence.
It's fascinating to see this evolution. Submarines, especially those armed with nuclear missiles, have become strategic assets that can influence global politics without firing a single shot.
While the advancement in technology is undoubted, we must not forget the strategic implications of such power. The ability to project force anywhere in the world's oceans changes the nature of engagement.
The silent warriors of the deep sea reflect a shift from honor-based engagements to shadow warfare. The importance of controlling the seas remains, but the methods and tactics have transformed substantially.
Archie raises a good point about strategic implications. The deterrence factor of nuclear submarines cannot be understated.
But let's not forget, the leap from wooden ships to these steel leviathans was not just about power. It was about extending a nation's reach invisibly across the globe.
Exactly, Jacob. And with such power comes great responsibility. The sea has always been a realm of mystery and strategic opportunities, now more than ever.
The role of submarines in nuclear deterrence has indeed made the world's oceans arenas of unseen chess games. The stakes are unimaginable, yet these silent patrols keep the balance.
While deterrence is a valid strategy, one cannot ignore the escalatory potential it harbors. The mere presence of such capabilities can heighten tensions.
The evolution towards silent, unseen combat beneath the waves has significantly altered the samurai's notion of honor in battle. Yet, understanding and mastering these new tactics is crucial for maintaining balance and peace.
It's clear that naval power has come a long way from the age of exploration. The strategic depth and technological advancements we've discussed today highlight not just a transformation in naval warfare, but also a shift in how power is perceived and projected globally. Let's dive into the evolution of air power. We see a dramatic shift from early flight capabilities to strategic bombing and finally to aerial surveillance during the Cold War.
It's fascinating to see how military strategy evolved with air power. From my time, reconnaissance balloons were a marvel. Now, imagining spy planes such as the U-2, it's a significant leap.
Indeed, Jacob. The integration of air power into military strategy fundamentally changed the way we view surveillance and reconnaissance. Satellites and high-altitude surveillance planes gave us eyes everywhere, fundamentally altering global military strategies.
This reliance on the skies also changed the dynamics of warfare. Air power isn't just about the physical, it's about the psychological. The mere presence of air superiority can deter actions and shift the balance of power.
I agree with Alethea's point, but let's not forget the devastating impact of air raids in World War I. While the technology was rudimentary, the psychological impact was profound. The Cold War took this to a new level with the threat of nuclear annihilation from the air.
Both of you highlight important aspects. However, the shift from confronting nature and mastering it for reconnaissance represents a paradigm shift. Previously, we fought within the constraints of nature. With air power, we sought to conquer it for intelligence, not just brute force.
The strategic use of air power definitely transformed the landscape of warfare. The Cold War exemplified this shift, not just technologically, but in how we approached conflict.
And let's not overlook the role of air power in enforcing no-fly zones. This was a novel way of asserting dominance without direct conflict, leveraging air superiority to influence ground actions indirectly.
That's a leap from my era where air superiority wasn't a concept. The evolution is not just technological, but strategic.
Correct, Jacob. It reflects a broader understanding of warfare beyond the immediate battleground to influencing policies and strategies globally.
I must interject, though, while air power reshaped strategic possibilities, the core of warfare, domination and deterrence, remained unchanged. The tools evolved, but the end goals persisted.
A valid point, Archie. The essence of warfare remains, yet the path to achieve it has diversified significantly with air power. This evolution reflects broader shifts in military thought and technology.
This discussion underscores the multifaceted impact of air power on Cold War dynamics, technologically, strategically, and psychologically. It's clear that the evolution of air power was a game changer in modern warfare. Let's pivot to the linchpin of the Cold War: intelligence and espionage. The creation of formal intelligence agencies during World War II marked a paradigm shift that intensified during the Cold War.
That's an interesting point, Bill. In comparison, Civil War scouts were elementary. The sophistication of Cold War espionage was frankly astonishing.
Indeed, Jacob. But let's not forget the ancient world had its own complex networks of spies and informants. The use of intelligence has always been critical in warfare, shaping strategies far beyond mere battlefield tactics.
Building on that, the modern intelligence community's importance can't be overstated. Global security now hinges on the ability to gather and interpret intelligence, much of which is a direct evolution of Cold War practices.
While those are valid points, the leap in sophistication isn't as wide as you might think. WWI code-breaking efforts laid much of the groundwork for signal intelligence. We've always sought the upper hand through knowledge.
True, Archie. Yet the essence of intelligence in warfare hasn't changed. Whether through samurai networks or modern satellites, the goal has always been to know the enemy's mind.
So it's clear that the thread of intelligence and espionage runs deep through the fabric of warfare history. However, the arms race in intelligence technology during the Cold War brought about an almost sci-fi landscape of spying.
Exactly, Bill. And let's not overlook the role of technology in all of this. Satellite technology, for instance, has revolutionized surveillance, making global intelligence a near instantaneous affair.
Technology indeed changed the game, but the human element remains irreplaceable. The stories of Cold War spies show that bravery, cunning, and betrayal could never be engineered or predicted.
I must admit, the technological advancements are impressive, but they could also lead to a cold, calculated approach to conflict, distancing the human cost from decision makers.
An astute observation, Jacob. In the era of the samurai, honor and the personal skill in combat were paramount. The Cold War's silent technological battles mark a stark departure from those values.
Clearly, the evolution of intelligence and espionage from ancient strategies to Cold War tactics shows both change and continuity. The tools and technology have evolved, but the underlying principles remain the same. Knowledge is power.
And let's not forget, the end goal of intelligence in the Cold War was to avoid direct conflict. In that sense, one could argue it played its part in maintaining peace, albeit a tense one.
Precisely, Archie. The Cold War might have been cold in terms of direct military engagement, but the intelligence war was fiercely hot. It was a different kind of battlefield, where information was the weapon of choice. It's a reminder that warfare is not just about the clash of armies, but also the clash of minds. The Cold War exemplified that like no other conflict.
The Cold War was as much a battle of ideologies as it was a standoff of nuclear capabilities. The fight against fascism in World War II seamlessly transformed into a battle against communism.
Indeed, Bill. The ideological conflict of the Cold War echoes the ancient battles for justice and power I'm familiar with. Ideologies have always been a powerful motivator for warfare, shaping societies in the course of history.
While I may not concur fully with the notion of ideologies overshadowing the tangible aspects of warfare, I do acknowledge its significant role during the Cold War. In comparison, the Civil War was fought over the immediate and pressing issues of states' rights and slavery, rather than abstract ideologies.
Jacob, while your point is taken, remember the ideological underpinnings of the Civil War cannot be entirely dismissed. The battle against communism during the Cold War was about preserving the democratic values and freedoms we hold dear, similar to the fight for human rights during the Civil War. Intriguing perspectives. However, from the samurai viewpoint, loyalty and honor to one's lord or country often surpass the broader ideological battles. The Cold War's ideological warfare was a foreign concept compared to the personal honor battles in my time.
I must interject. The ideological component of the Cold War, distinct as it was, cannot be looked at in isolation. The First World War didn't have the ideological fervor of the Cold War, but it had nationalism as a driving force. Each conflict has its unique ideological background, but the impact of ideology in the Cold War was unparalleled in its global reach and in the way it permeated every aspect of civilian and military life.
Archie raises a good point about the pervasive nature of ideology during the Cold War. It was not just a conflict between two superpowers, but a global contest of values and systems of governance.
And I must acknowledge Archie's comparison to nationalism brings a valuable dimension to our discussion. Ideologies, whether they are about governance systems, justice, or national pride, have long been catalysts for conflict and cooperation alike.
While I understand the global impact of the Cold War's ideological battle, I remain convinced that the immediate, tangible causes of war often overshadow these broader ideological concerns.
Jacob, I respect your stance. Yet the ideological battle of the Cold War facilitated the rise of proxy wars, influencing conflicts worldwide, affecting millions indirectly. This indirect influence of ideology on warfare is unprecedented. Nadia, your point about proxy wars illustrates the complex nature of ideological conflicts. The Cold War's impact on various third countries was indeed profound, differing significantly from direct confrontations in my era, where the battle's outcome and impact were more immediate and visible.
It appears we all agree on the significance of ideology in the Cold War, though we approach its impact and comparison to historical conflicts from diverse perspectives. The lesson here is the enduring power and complexity of ideologies in shaping the world stage.
Precisely, Bill. Understanding the ideological components of past conflicts provides critical insights into current and future geopolitical dynamics. Despite our differing viewpoints, the importance of ideology in the Cold War is unmistakable and worthy of deep exploration.
Let's dive into the role of economic resources and sanctions in warfare. It's a topic that has shaped conflicts through the ages. The Marshall Plan is a prime example where economic reconstruction was strategically used post-World War II. Thoughts?
It's an interesting contrast to the Civil War, where economic blockades of ports were deployed. Those blockades aimed to choke the Confederacy, similar to how Cold War sanctions sought to constrain the Soviet economy.
It is about control. In ancient times, sieging a city to cut off resources was equivalent to modern sanctions. The strategy forces an opponent to submit without traditional warfare, a clever yet brutal tactic.
Economic sanctions today, much like during the Cold War, are a double-edged sword. They aim to pressure governments while minimizing harm to civilians, but the reality is often far from that intention.
I must interject. The efficacy of such sanctions often leans on moral ambiguity. WWI showcased how economic blockades can devastate civilian populations. The intent versus the outcome of economic warfare is a complex debate.
Indeed, during the Sengoku period, withholding rice supplies, much like sanctions, was strategic, but honor demanded we consider the impact on the innocent. There's a fine line between strategy and suffering.
Nadia mentioned a double-edged sword. Can we delve deeper into that?
Certainly. While sanctions aim to coerce change without direct conflict, they can inadvertently strengthen regimes. Nationalist sentiments can surge, rallying people around the flag, so to speak. It's a delicate balance.
A valid point. Strength through adversity is a common theme in history. Sometimes, the pressure exerted by sanctions galvanizes rather than weakens.
But isn't the objective to avoid outright war? I see the rationale behind economic sanctions as a peaceful alternative, despite their imperfections.
Peaceful, Jacob? The suffering induced by economic deprivation might argue otherwise. It's still warfare, just on a different front.
A thoughtful disagreement, Archie. The distinction lies in the visibility of suffering. Economic sanctions, much like my examples from the Sengoku period, do not leave physical scars, but the pain endured by the populace is very real.
So we circle back to the question of effectiveness and morality in using economic resources as weapons.
Yes, and let's not forget, the ultimate goal is to restore peace and stability. How we achieve that, through economic means or otherwise, remains a deeply ethical consideration.
Acknowledging that no tactic is without flaw, it appears our consensus leans towards the necessary, albeit careful, use of economic measures in conflict.
Precisely. Understanding the past as we do illuminates the shadows in which we deploy such strategies today.
A rare moment of agreement, though I remain skeptical of its universal application.
And skepticism ensures our strategies are thoroughly vetted. This discussion underscores the complexity of economic warfare, an enduring aspect of human conflict. Excellent insights, everyone. Let's delve into the concept of total war and see how it's evolved, particularly how the Cold War era represented a shift from direct conflict to proxy wars. Jacob, can we start with your perspective on total mobilization of societies in the Civil War?
Certainly. The Civil War demanded every aspect of society to contribute: men to fight, women to support the war effort, and entire economies to pivot towards warfare. This total mobilization created a societal focus on victory at all costs. The Cold War, however, shifted this total mobilization into a state of global tension and fear, rather than direct involvement.
A valid point, Jacob, yet it's critical to note the human cost in ancient times. Total war was not just about mobilization, but also about the impact on civilian populations. The Cold War's proxy wars carried this forward, devastating countries where superpowers fought their ideological battles.
Alethea, does the evolution towards proxy wars represent a progression or regression in your view?
It's a regression in the sense that it masked the true face of conflict, making it easier for superpowers to engage without direct consequence, all while local populations suffered immensely.
And adding to Alethea's observation, the morality of engaging in proxy wars comes into question. It allowed for the continuation of conflict without the same level of public outcry seen in the world wars. The cloak of secrecy and the indirect approach complicated the ethical considerations.
While I acknowledge the points made, we must not overlook the psychological toll of total war during WWI compared to the Cold War's constant threat, especially the nuclear threat. Living under the shadow of mutual assured destruction had profound implications on society's psyche.
Archie raises an essential aspect, the psychological impact. The Cold War bore a different kind of weight, a silent threat that permeated everyday life. This evolution from the destruction witnessed in total war to a looming dread marks a significant shift in how wars were experienced by civilians.
The psychological warfare, then, took on a whole new dimension.
Precisely. It was no longer just about the physical battlefield, but also the battle for the mind, manifesting in the relentless propaganda and the culture of fear.
Yet let's not romanticize the past's total mobilization. The toll on human life and society was devastating. The shift to proxy wars, while morally complex, arguably spared the world from the horrors of another world war.
I'd argue, Jacob, that it didn't spare those living in the proxy war zones. The international community's eyes were often diverted from these conflicts, allowing atrocities to occur unchecked.
A sobering perspective, Nadia. This discussion underscores the complexity of warfare evolution and its impact on both a global and a personal level. The shift from total war to proxy wars during the Cold War era reflects significant changes in military strategy, international relations, and moral considerations. Let's delve into the role of diplomacy and warfare. Cold War-era diplomacy, especially nuclear deterrence, was a delicate dance. Look at Potsdam, negotiating peace while silently preparing for a potential escalation.
The Civil War, on the other hand, was stark in its failure of diplomacy. A house divided cannot stand, and there was scant effort to prevent the inevitable conflict. The contrast with Cold War negotiations is monumental.
An admirable point, Jacob. The ancient world, too, saw alliances and treaties. The Cold War's bipolar world order was, in essence, a large-scale reflection of ancient practices, albeit with the terrifying specter of nuclear war.
Diplomatic channels in the Cold War were, indeed, our lifeline. Hotlines between the superpowers, back-channel communications, all critical in preventing nuclear escalation. It shows the evolution of diplomatic efforts in maintaining global peace.
While I see where you're coming from, Nadia, the effectiveness of these channels can be debated. During WWI, despite diplomatic efforts, communications often failed, leading to disastrous results. The Cold War managed to avoid direct conflict, but was it diplomacy or the fear of mutual destruction?
The essence of diplomacy is in its honor and the pursuit of peaceful resolution. The Cold War, through its silent battles and quiet negotiations, exemplifies this, albeit imperfectly. In the era of the samurai, honor determined the course of conflicts, a tradition that finds its echo in the careful diplomatic dances of the Cold War.
It's fascinating to see how each era interprets diplomacy and honor. The Cold War indeed forced a new playbook, given the nuclear stakes.
Yet we must appreciate the intricate balance that was sustained. Without these diplomatic efforts, our global story could have been dramatically different.
True, but let's not romanticize the effectiveness of Cold War diplomacy too much. Several moments, like the Cuban Missile Crisis, came dangerously close to catastrophe.
Illusions aside, Jacob, those moments also showed the capacity for diplomacy to pull us back from the brink. It was a testament to the maturation of international relations and the recognition of nuclear war's unacceptability.
A valid perspective, Nadia, but at what cost? The constant threat and paranoia fueled an arms race that strained nations' economies and psyches.
The cost was steep, yet it also forced innovation in conflict resolution and international cooperation. It's a double-edged sword. The tensions spurred developments in diplomacy and governance that echo today.
Each of you brings a critical angle to this discussion. The Cold War's diplomacy, influenced by the shadow of nuclear conflict, indeed scaled new heights in international relations. Its lessons endure, reminding us of the fragile balance between conflict and peaceful negotiation. Let's dive into the evolution of propaganda and psychological warfare. Its roots run deep in history, but the Cold War marked a turning point in its sophistication.
During the Civil War, newspapers were a primary source of propaganda. The bias in reporting was clear, aiming to boost morale or demonize the enemy. It was straightforward but effective for the time.
The Cold War propaganda leaned heavily on emerging technologies. The use of television and radio broadcasts allowed for a more immediate and widespread dissemination of ideological messages.
Indeed, Nadia, and it wasn't just about disseminating messages, but crafting narratives that could shape perceptions globally. The ancient use of symbols and messages was more localized, but served a similar purpose: to unite people or to redefine an enemy.
The concept of honor and the samurai code was also a form of ideological indoctrination. It instilled a sense of duty and loyalty. However, the Cold War's psychological warfare had a broader reach, exploiting fears and hopes without a blade drawn.
You make an interesting point, Katsuro. The transition from simple patriotic posters in WWI to the complex media strategies during the Cold War was indeed remarkable. It shows a clear evolution in psychological tactics aimed not just at the enemy, but at one's own citizens.
And it wasn't just about the content that was broadcasted, but how it was presented. The Cold War era saw an unprecedented level of sophistication in the use of media to manipulate public opinion and governmental policies.
Let's not overlook, however, the role of fear-mongering about nuclear annihilation. It was a psychological tool to maintain control over populations and ensure alignment with governmental policies.
Correct, Jacob. And extending that point, the use of defectors' and dissidents' testimonies were amplified to sow distrust and fear. It wasn't just about promoting an ideology, but actively discrediting the opposition.
An operative method, indeed. Yet we must appreciate the strategic intent behind such psychological operations. They were as much a weapon as any missile or spy network, aiming to destabilize without physical confrontation.
The depth of strategy is undeniable. However, the ethical implications of such widespread manipulation cannot be ignored. The toll on public trust and individual psyche was and remains considerable.
The ethical debate is pivotal, Katsuro. The ends often justified the means, leading to a blurred line between safeguarding one's nation and infringing upon personal freedoms. A dangerous precedent that has echoes in today's world.
A potent point, Archie. The Cold War might have ended, but the techniques and strategies developed during that period have left a lasting legacy on global politics and warfare. It's a stark reminder of the power of words and media in shaping not just public opinion, but historical outcomes. Let's gather our final thoughts. It's clear that our roundtable today has traversed a wide range of topics regarding the Cold War, its historical precedents, and implications for the future. Alethea, may we start with you?
Certainly, Bill. Reflecting on today's discourse, I am struck by the cyclical nature of history and warfare. In every era, including the Cold War, we see the same strategic motivations dressed in new technologies and ideologies. The ancient importance of intelligence and espionage, for instance, merely evolved in complexity by the time of the Cold War. Our discussion hammers home the necessity of understanding our past to navigate the future of international relations and warfare.
I must caution, however, that while there are lessons to be drawn from history, we should not become captive to historical analogies. The Cold War, with its nuclear deterrence, created a fundamentally altered state of international conflict that requires fresh analysis. Our understanding of ancient and past conflicts enriches our perspective, but should not confine our strategic thinking.
Jacob, you raise a valid point. The uniqueness of the Cold War, especially the omnipresence of nuclear threat, did forge a new paradigm. Yet, as Alethea mentioned, the threads of espionage, power play, and the ideological crusade are as old as time. What stands out is the magnitude of destruction that nuclear weapons introduced, fundamentally changing how nations engage and deter conflicts. It's a sobering reminder of the responsibilities of those in command.
It's that very escalation in the stakes of warfare that worries me. The conversations we've had today underline a progression towards potentially more devastating conflicts, with technology at the heart. While naval and aerial power transform the complexion of conflicts, it is the invisible threats, cyber warfare, and artificial intelligence that may define future confrontations. I dare say, our understanding of warfare must evolve yet again.
Indeed, Archie. The evolution of warfare and diplomacy, as discussed, reflects a shift from direct confrontation to more nuanced strategies, including economic sanctions and psychological warfare. Honor and direct engagement have been replaced by silent wars where the battlegrounds are economies, mines, and information networks. It's crucial that future leaders learn from the Cold War to navigate these silent yet equally dangerous waters.
I appreciate the heated yet thoughtful exchange of views today. Each of you brings a unique perspective, grounded in a rich understanding of historical and modern warfare. Our discussion proves vital in understanding not just the Cold War, but also in glimpsing the future challenges in international relations and conflict resolution. It is only through these rigorous debates that we can hope to equip future leaders with the knowledge and wisdom to avoid past mistakes.
Well said, Bill. The Cold War's extended peace, born from the threat of mutual assured destruction, serves as a stark reminder of the precarious balance world leaders must navigate. It underscores the importance of diplomacy, intelligence, and ultimately, a deep understanding of history to prevent future conflicts.
As we forge ahead, let's not forget the lessons of restraint and the value of open dialogue. The Cold War taught us that even in times of intense ideological division, it is possible to avert disaster through careful negotiation and mutual respect for the devastating power at humanity's disposal.
That's a powerful note to end on. Understanding the Cold War goes beyond academic exercise. It's about ensuring a safer future for all.
Thank you, panel, for a riveting discussion. Your insights not only shed light on the Cold War, but also illuminate paths for peace and stability in our times. Let's carry forward the lessons learned with a commitment to a more understanding and peaceful world.